began with silence. Not the comforting kind, but the ominous stillness that grips the air before a storm breaks, the sort that warns something is deeply, horribly wrong. On the evening of March 8, 2019, in the suffocating chaos of Delhi's urban sprawl, two pedestrians crossed a desolate overpass in Syed Nangloi, West Delhi. Below them, a dark and wide drainage canal gurgled with decay and filth, an oblivion that swallows everything. One of them noticed something bobbing gently in the water, a maroon-pink suitcase, new-looking and almost regal amidst the filth. It floated unnaturally, half submerged, half exposed, as if it wanted to be found. The man hesitated. Who throws a perfectly fine suitcase into a sewer canal? Was it discarded luggage or something more sinister? As chance, or fate, would have it, two passing police constables from Nahal Vihar station noticed the small crowd forming. The suitcase was not in their jurisdiction, but protocol and suspicion demanded attention. They alerted the local West Delhi police station. What came next began a descent into one of the most bone-chilling double murder cases the capital had seen in recent years. By the time the West Delhi police arrived, a crowd had gathered, murmuring and speculating. The suitcase was retrieved by sanitation workers. But when it was unzipped, reality struck like a whip. Inside was the decaying corpse of a middle-aged woman, her limbs contorted, bones likely broken to fit her inside the confined space. She was dressed in an orange salwar suit, socks still clinging to her feet, a green talisman wrapped around her arm, and a rudraksha mala around her neck, a grotesque juxtaposition of peace and brutality. The autopsy confirmed the unthinkable: strangulation marks and the presence of sedatives in her system. She had been drugged, possibly while trusting the hand that offered her tea. The media buzzed with rumors, but the police focused. There was no ID, no witnesses, no name. But bodies always speak, eventually. And then, a lid emerged. A missing persons report filed 4 days earlier at the same police station mentioned a couple. Gurmeet Singh and his wife, Jagir Kaur, both untraceable since early March. The report had been lodged by their daughter, Sonia. Sonia lived with her parents in Delhi's Nilothai extension. She had left her husband's house due to ongoing domestic disputes, bringing her 2 children with her. Her relationship with her husband was strained, but with her parents, things seemed stable, or so it appeared. The household had known its share of conflict, but murder, that was unthinkable. Or was it? When Sonia was brought in to identify the corpse, her reaction was strange. She refused to confirm it was her mother, claimed the decomposition made it impossible to be sure. It was her husband, Sonia's estranged spouse, who glanced at the green talisman and the rudraksha beads and whispered, "That's her. That's Jagir Kaur." Why did Sonia not recognize, or refuse to recognize, her own mother's body while her husband did? Was it shock, denial, or guilt? The next morning, March 9th, the investigation deepened. Sonia, now more composed, admitted the body was her mother's. But where was her father, Gurmeet Singh? If he wasn't the killer, was he the next victim? The police now faced a race against time. Was another corpse already floating in some forgotten canal? And then, the second suitcase surfaced. It was retrieved mere meters from where the first was found. Larger, greenish-blue, heavier. This time, the contents left no doubt. The remains of Gurmeet Singh, treated with the same cruelty, drugged, strangled, folded into a case, discarded like trash. Delhi now had a double homicide, with no suspects and a family spiraling in shock. Yet, suspicion lingers where emotion runs too deep. The police began their hunt, not for strangers, but for those within, They say the enemy outside cannot harm you if the enemy within is powerless. But what if the very hand that fed on your love sharpens the blade that ends your life? By March 9th, Delhi police knew one thing for certain. This was not a random act of violence. The killings were methodical, premeditated, and executed with disturbing precision. Both victims, Gurmeet Singh and Jagir Kaur, had been drugged, strangled, and packed into suitcases, each action requiring time, calm, and intent. No break-in, no signs of forced entry. The killer had been invited inside. As officers began their inquiries, a pattern emerged. Sonia, the grieving daughter, had made the missing persons report on March 4th. But Gurmeet had last been seen alive by neighbors on February 21st, and Jagir Kaur only returned from Punjab on March 2nd. Why, the investigators asked, did Sonia wait days to report both parents missing? A daughter so close to her parents wouldn't wait unless she already knew they weren't coming back. This wasn't a matter of oversight. It was a carefully rehearsed delay, time to dispose of evidence, to weep on cue to perfect a lie. And yet, lies always leave a trail. The police turned to technology, the cold, impartial eye of surveillance, call records, cell tower data, and CCTV footage became their silent witnesses. Sonia's phone showed frequent intimate communication with a man named Vikram Dixit, also known as Prince. He was from Lucknow, an event manager, charismatic and ambitious. He wasn't just a friend. He was the secret co-author of this blood-written plan. When asked, Sonia pretended Vikram was just an acquaintance she had met while searching for a job. But the call logs betrayed her. Hours of conversations daily, far beyond professional courtesy. Moreover, CCTV footage from March 2nd, the day Jagir returned from Punjab, revealed Vikram and Sonia riding a motorbike near the canal at night. A pink suitcase precariously balanced between them. It was no longer a question of if they did it. It was time to find out how. March 10th. Police picked up Vikram. Sonia didn't yet know he was in custody. She still believed she could manipulate the truth, feign innocence, and outlast suspicion. But when she was brought into interrogation and saw Vikram's broken gaze, her resolve shattered. She confessed. The betrayal began months ago. Sonia, embittered by her marital collapse, returned to her parents' house. It was meant to be temporary. But as the days passed, greed and resentment festered. Gurmeet Singh, once a prosperous businessman in Dubai, had returned with wealth stored not in banks but in a green suitcase, stuffed with jewelry, cash, and the title deeds to their 50 lakh Delhi home. Sonia wanted all of it. And Vikram? He saw her desperation as a ladder to his own dreams. He needed money to build his event empire in Delhi. They fell into a dangerous agreement. If her parents were gone, the inheritance would be hers, and, by extension, his, February 21st. Jagir Kaur was away in Punjab, mourning her mother's death. Sonia laced Gurmeet Singh's evening tea with sedatives. As he fell unconscious, Vikram arrived from Lucknow, not alone, but with two associates, Raghvendra Singh and Diwakar Singh, men hired for 1 lakh rupees to execute the murders. Together, the four dragged the unconscious Gurmeet into the bedroom. As Sonia watched in silence, they strangled her father. His corpse was jammed into the green suitcase, the one he had once used to carry riches across borders. In the dead of night, they transported it to the canal. Stones were tied around it to keep it submerged. But the plan required patience. They had to wait for Jagir to return. On March 2nd, she came home. Confused by her husband's absence, she asked Sonia where he was. Sonia lied. He's out. He'll be back soon. That evening, the cycle repeated. More sedatives, more lies. As Jagir slipped into unconsciousness, Vikram and his hired hands returned. Another strangulation, another suitcase. But this time, in haste, they forgot the stones. That pink suitcase would eventually rise, exposing everything. And Sonia, she spent the next 2 days weaving a mask of grief. On March 4th, she reported them missing. On March 8th, her mother's body was found. And through it all, she played the daughter torn by tragedy, while hiding a darkness that few could even fathom. Yet, for all their planning, they forgot that greed makes people sloppy. Sonia's name was already forged on fraudulent property documents. She had attempted to sell the house using fake signatures. Her father signed only in Punjabi. She signed in English with misspellings. Gurmeet noticed. He threatened legal action. That's when the plan solidified. He had to die. The forensic trail, the digital breadcrumbs, the careless CCTV footage, it all collapsed on them like a tomb. Vikram broke. Sonia confessed. The remaining killers, Raghavendra and Diwakar, vanished into the shadows. But not for long. On March 12th, both were captured. Vikram and Diwakar would later receive bail, with Vikram even skipping court in 2021 before being rearrested in Haryana. But none of that mattered anymore. The veil had lifted. The myth of the mourning daughter was shattered. She hadn't just killed her parents. She had hunted them, orchestrated their deaths like a grotesque opera of self-interest. But if you think the story ends here, you are mistaken. Because while Sonia rotted in custody, the world outside asked, why? Why kill the only people who took her back when the world had rejected her? Why betray the hands that held her children, fed her, forgave her? The final chapter lies not in the killings, but in what Sonia hoped to become after. Her ambition, her madness, and the lies she told herself, that they were in her way, not her foundation. And now, I ask you, can a person so broken ever be made whole again? It is one thing to kill out of rage in a moment of blinding fury. It is another, far darker, to kill with calculation, to watch your parents die, and to feel nothing but relief. What kind of mind orchestrates such evil not out of passion, but profit? In the third and final act of this unholy drama, we descend into the rotted soul of Sonia Kaur, a woman who traded her bloodline for brick and paper. With all 4 suspects in custody, Sonia, Vikram Dixit, and the 2 contract killers, Raghavendra and Diwakar, the police had the full puzzle laid bare. What they found was not just a crime, but a sickness that had gestated for years, a festering greed born from disappointment, pride, and failed dreams. Let us return to the beginning, not of the murder, but of Sonia's descent. She was once a married woman with 2 children, living in what should have been a stable home. But things fell apart, as they often do when people are not willing to fix themselves. Fights with her husband escalated, and rather than endure or evolve, she chose to flee, running not for safety, but for opportunity. She returned to her parents' home not as a daughter in need, but as a predator waiting for weakness. And there it was. Gurmeet Singh, once a successful businessman in Dubai, had returned to Delhi in retirement. He brought with him a lifetime's worth of wealth: gold, property, documents, all stuffed into a single suitcase, the same one that would later become his coffin. He had no reason to suspect his daughter would one day covet that suitcase more than his life. But Sonia's resentment festered. She watched as her father refused to put the home in her name. She heard no when she demanded they sell the property. She saw him threaten to go to the police when he caught her forging his signature. And slowly, in her eyes, Her parents stopped being family. They became obstacles. This was the moment Vikram Dixit entered the picture. Charming, confident, filled with ambition but lacking capital, he saw in Sonia both a tool and a fool. Together, they built a fantasy of selling the house, launching an event business, living freely, starting fresh. Vikram was already estranged from his own wife. He claimed she had an affair and bore another man's child. But it was unclear whether he was delusional, opportunistic, or both. They decided if Sonia couldn't inherit the house legally, she would claim it through murder. And so, the plan was born. Vikram would travel from Lucknow twice. First, on February 21st, to assist in Gurmeet's murder. The sedatives were prepared. The suitcase selected. Sonia waited until her mother was away in Punjab and drugged her father's evening tea. Vikram and his hired killers came under cover of darkness and strangled the unconscious man in his sleep. His body was folded, broken, and packed away like clutter. 10 days later, March 2nd, Jagir Kaur returned home. She too asked questions. She too drank poisoned tea. And she too was silenced. This time, a new suitcase, pink, pristine, and grotesquely ironic, was used. Sonia and Vikram disposed of her body, not knowing that this mistake, a floating case, would doom them. But the depravity did not end with murder. After the killings, Sonia didn't run. She didn't confess. She lived in that very house, with her children, with the stench of death clinging to the walls, pretending nothing had happened. She even took the time to file a missing persons report days later, crying crocodile tears before officers, neighbors, and relatives. She believed she could outsmart everyone, but the devil always leaves footprints. There was CCTV footage of the motorbike trips, call records tying Sonia and Vikram to each other, and to the dates of the murders. Property brokers came forward claiming Sonia had approached them with forged papers to sell the house. Bank records showed attempts to mortgage the home using fake signatures. And, most damning of all, the bodies. Crushed, bruised, chemically sedated, and buried in the very suitcases that had once held their families' fortunes. On March 11th, as Jagir and Gurmeet were finally given a funeral by their remaining children, Sonia attended, not as a grieving daughter, but as a monster hidden in plain sight. Witnesses later reported that she smiled, even laughed. One of her brothers, stunned by the coldness in her eyes, recalled her whispering, "I set them free." What kind of daughter sees murder as mercy? The case went to trial. Vikram, slippery as ever, managed to secure bail on the pretense of caring for his ailing mother in 2020. He was supposed to return to jail by March 2021, but vanished. A non-bailable warrant was issued. A 25,000 rupee reward announced. By December 2021, he was captured in Haryana. Diwakar, too, was briefly released and rearrested. Raghvendra's calls and one recovered gold earring from the victims further tied him to the scene. The justice system, sluggish though it is, had gathered its net, but questions still haunt the case. Like ghosts, Sonia can never silence. What makes a daughter turn on her parents, not in the heat of the moment, but with clinical precision? Was it the lure of money? The delusion of freedom with a lover? The belief that she could build a new life upon the bones of the old? Or was it something darker? Perhaps Sonia had convinced herself she had been wronged, that she deserved everything, every coin, every inch of the house, every moment of her parents' remaining lives. Maybe, in her fractured mind, it wasn't betrayal. It was justice. But justice, in the end, found her. Today, Sonia Kaur sits in prison, her dreams shattered, her children orphaned by her own hand, and her family forever broken. Vikram's business never took off. The house they killed for remains unsold, its walls soaked in silence, and the world remembers them, not as visionaries, not as lovers, but as parasites, feeding on the very flesh that created them.